I never imagined that planning a surprise anniversary dinner would lead to me wearing scalding coffee on my favorite dress, or that the woman sitting next to my husband of 7 years would be my own stepsister. My name is Eva Winters, and 10 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage, the perfect career, and the perfect extended family. Looking back now, I can trace the exact moment my carefully constructed life collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of my 7th wedding anniversary began like any other day, with precision, planning, and the comforting rhythm of routine. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., careful not to disturb Colby, who always slept until 7. I slipped into my running clothes, laced up my shoes, and headed out for my daily 5-mile run through our upscale Atlanta neighborhood. Running had always been my therapy, my time to plan the day ahead while watching the sun rise over the historic homes and boutique storefronts that made our neighborhood one of the most desirable in the city. That morning, my mind was buzzing with anniversary plans. 7 years with Colby Sullivan, pharmaceutical sales director, community council member, and the man whose ambition matched my own perfectly. As I rounded the final corner toward home, I admired our house, a renovated craftsman with the perfect blend of historic charm and modern upgrades that I'd spent 3 years meticulously designing. The copper address numbers gleamed in the early morning light, each one perfectly polished, just like everything else in our lives. Inside, I showered quickly and dressed for work. A tailored navy dress, pearls, and the diamond earrings Colby had given me for our 5th anniversary. My reflection in the mirror showed exactly what I'd worked so hard to create: the image of success. Executive Director of Development at the Westbrook Foundation by age 35, married to a rising star in the pharmaceutical industry, board member, for 3 local charities. Colby was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, scrolling through emails on his phone while the coffee machine hummed. "Morning," he said, barely looking up. "I'll be late tonight. Dinner with the regional team." I smiled, knowing he had no idea about my plans. "That's fine. I have plenty to keep me busy." What I didn't mention was that I'd spent the past month organizing a surprise dinner at Callaway's, the exclusive restaurant where he'd proposed. I'd called in 3 favors and made a substantial donation to get the private room on a Thursday night. I'd invited his parents to fly in from Chicago. I'd even arranged for his brother to drive up from Florida. Everything was set to surprise him. "Don't forget we have the Thompson benefit tomorrow," I reminded him, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Already in my calendar. And don't we have dinner with your dad and Barbara next week?" I nodded. My father had remarried Barbara Palmer when I was 22, bringing her and her 19-year-old daughter April into our family. 10 years later, we'd settled into a comfortable, if not particularly close, extended family arrangement. Quarterly dinners, holiday gatherings, obligatory birthday calls. "And Mia called yesterday," I added, referring to my closest friend and college roommate. "She's finalizing her divorce." Colby raised an eyebrow. "3rd one this year in our circle. Makes you grateful for what we have, doesn't it?" I nodded, thinking about how often we'd privately judged our friends' failed marriages. Too emotional, we'd concluded. Not practical enough. Not committed to making it work. Colby and I had approached marriage like we approached our careers, with strategy, clear goals, and unwavering determination to succeed. As I watched him straighten his already perfectly knotted tie, I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. When had our conversations become so transactional? When had his eyes stopped meeting mine when we spoke? I pushed the thought away. We were busy, successful. This was what achievement looked like. After Colby left for work, I made a final call to Callaway's to confirm the arrangements for that evening. Then I called Abby, my assistant at the foundation, to review the day's schedule. "The senator's office confirmed for next Tuesday," Abby reported. And the proposal for the Children's Health Initiative is ready for your review. Perfect. And has Curtis Morgan confirmed his donation? Curtis was our newest board member, a retired investment banker whose wealth we were eagerly pursuing. Not yet, but he's attending tonight's gallery opening. You could speak with him there. I'll need to skip that, I said, surprising her. We never missed networking opportunities. It's my anniversary. Oh, congratulations. What did Colby get you? The question caught me off guard. In truth, we hadn't discussed gifts. The last few anniversaries had been marked with practical items: a new watch for him, a spa weekend for me, selected with careful consideration of their appropriate value and utility. It's a surprise, I said vaguely, ignoring the small voice wondering if Colby had remembered at all. My day at the foundation unfolded with its usual efficiency: meetings with donors, conference calls with grant recipients, strategic planning. Sessions. I left early at 3:30, telling Abby I had a dentist appointment. Instead, I went home to change. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep burgundy silk that I knew Colby would appreciate. Conservative enough for his parents, but with just enough flair to make it special. I styled my hair, applied makeup with precision, and put on the bracelet Colby had given me on our wedding day. The surprise was set for 7 p.m. I'd told his assistant, Mia, to clear his calendar without telling him why. His brother Dean would, coincidentally, run into him near the restaurant and suggest a quick drink, leading him to the private dining room where we'd all be waiting. At 6:15, I pulled up to Calloway's. The maitre d' showed me to the private room where the staff was putting final touches on the table settings. Colby's parents hadn't arrived yet, but they'd texted that their Uber was 10 minutes away. Dean had confirmed he was in position. Everything was perfect. Just as I'd planned. At 6:30, I received a text from Dean. He's not at the office. Assistant says he left early. A flicker of annoyance. This wasn't part of the plan. I called Colby's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He's probably stuck in traffic, I told Dean. Try his cell again. By 6:45, Colby's parents had arrived, confusion creasing their faces as I explained the situation. I'm sure he's on his way, his mother said, patting my hand. You know how he loses track of time. But I didn't know that. In 7 years, Colby had never been late to anything. His punctuality was as much a part of him as his perfectly pressed shirts and his methodical approach to everything from brushing his teeth to planning our investment portfolio. At 7, with still no word from Colby, I felt the first real stirrings of concern. This wasn't like him. I excused myself and stepped outside to call again. Still no answer. On impulse, I opened the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago. For a moment, I hesitated, feeling like I was crossing some boundary. But concern overrode my hesitation. The map loaded, showing Colby's location just 3 blocks away, at the Grant Hotel. Relief washed over me. He must be at an impromptu work meeting. The regional team was probably staying there. I could walk over, discreetly extract him, and we'd laugh about it later. I told his parents I'd found him and would be right back. The Grant was an elegant boutique hotel with a renowned cocktail lounge favored by business travelers. As I walked through the ornate lobby, I smoothed my dress, rehearsing how I'd interrupt with grace and humor. The lounge was dimly lit, with plush velvet seating arranged for privacy. I scanned the space, looking for Colby's familiar profile. And then I saw him, in a corner booth, leaning intimately toward a woman whose face was obscured. I moved closer, telling myself this was clearly a business meeting, despite the setting and the body language that suggested otherwise. And then the woman laughed, tossing her head back in a gesture so familiar it stopped me in my tracks. April, my stepsister. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The recognition hit me like a physical blow. April. 10 years younger than me, always the family's free spirit. The one who never quite settled into a career or relationship. April, who had stayed in our guest house for 3 months last year while finding herself. April, who had always looked at Colby with an admiration I'd mistaken for sisterly affection. I stood frozen, watching as Colby reached across the table and took her hand. The way he looked at her, I'd never seen that expression on his face before. Certainly not when he looked at me. Their fingers intertwined on the table beside a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. Without conscious thought, I found myself moving toward their table. They were so absorbed in each other they didn't notice me until I was standing right there, my shadow falling across their clasped hands. "Eva!" April's voice held shock, but not nearly enough guilt. "What are you doing here?" Colby withdrew his hand slowly, his face transitioning from surprise to a controlled neutral expression I recognized from negotiations. "I was about to ask you the same thing," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded when inside I felt like I was shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Considering it's my anniversary dinner and everyone is waiting for you at Callaway's." April's eyes widened. "Anniversary? Oh God, Ava, I didn't what?" I cut her off. "Didn't remember the date you became my stepsister or didn't care that you're sleeping with my husband?" Colby stood up, his demeanor shifting to the calm, reasonable tone he used when managing difficult situations. "Ava, you're making a scene. Let's discuss this privately." It was the wrong thing to say. The perfectly wrong thing, delivered in exactly the tone guaranteed to ignite the emotions I'd been trained my entire life to keep in check. "A scene?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Is that what you call it when your wife catches you with her stepsister on your anniversary? A scene?" People were turning to look now. The bartender had paused mid-pour. April was shrinking into the booth, her face flushed with what might have been embarrassment, or might just have been the reflection of her scarlet dress, far more revealing than anything I would ever wear. "How long?" I demanded, looking between them. "How long has this been going on?" "Eva, please," Colby said, reaching for my arm. "We can explain everything. It's not what you think." And then I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound I barely recognized as coming from me. "Not what I think? Are you seriously going to try that line? On me?" That's when I noticed the gift box on the table. Silver paper, white ribbon. Exactly the kind of elegant, understated wrapping Colby always chose. Without thinking, I reached for it. "Is this for her?" I asked, holding the box. "On our anniversary?" "Put that down," Colby said, his controlled facade cracking slightly. "That's private." Private. The word hit me like another slap. 7 years of marriage, and he was claiming privacy for a gift meant for my stepsister. I opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a small heart charm, exactly the kind of sentimental jewelry Colby had always dismissed as trite when I'd admired similar pieces. Something broke inside me. 7 years of carefully maintained composure, of being the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect professional. It all came crashing down in that moment. "How could you?" I whispered, looking not at Colby, but at April. "We're family." April at least had the decency to look ashamed. "It just happened, Eva. We didn't plan it. Things haven't been right between us for a long time," Colby added, as if this explained everything. I stared at him, this stranger in my husband's body. "And this is how you decided to address that? Not with counseling, not with a conversation, but by sleeping with my stepsister?" Colby's jaw tightened, the only visible sign of his rising anger. He reached for the coffee cup on the table, his movements deliberate, controlled. "You're making assumptions. This isn't what it looks like." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Explain. It to me. Explain why you're here with April instead of at the anniversary dinner I planned." Explain the bracelet. He lifted the cup to his lips, taking a slow sip while gathering his thoughts. Classic Colby, always taking a moment to formulate the perfect response. But I was done waiting for his perfectly crafted explanations. Your parents are at Callaway's right now, I said. Should I call them over here? Let them see what their perfect son is really like. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Before I could react, he stood and in one fluid motion threw the contents of his coffee cup directly at me. The hot liquid hit my chest and face, soaking through the silk of my carefully chosen dress. The pain was immediate and shocking. The coffee had been steaming hot. For a moment, no one moved. April gasped. Other patrons stared in horror. A server rushed forward with napkins. Colby stood perfectly still, his expression a mixture of shock and something that looked horribly like satisfaction. Now look what you made me do, he said quietly. For several heartbeats, I stood frozen, coffee dripping down my face and neck, soaking into the silk of my anniversary dress. The pain of the hot liquid was nothing compared to the public humiliation, the betrayal by not just my husband, but my own stepsister. The elegant hotel lounge had gone completely silent. Then someone was beside me, pressing a cloth napkin into my hand. "Come with me, honey," said a voice I didn't recognize. I turned, to see an older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. She guided me away from the table, away from Colby and April, toward the ladies' room. "I can handle this," I protested weakly, still in shock. "I'm sure you can," the woman said. "But sometimes it's okay to accept help." In the bathroom, she helped me clean up as best we could. The burgundy silk was ruined, stained with dark splotches that would never come out. My skin was red and irritated wherever the coffee had touched. "I'm Mia," the woman said, wringing out a cool cloth and pressing it gently to my neck. Mia Thornton. I recognized the name immediately. Mia Thornton was a legend in Atlanta philanthropy circles, the founder of the Thornton Women's Leadership Initiative and a fierce advocate for women rebuilding their lives after trauma and abuse. I'd tried to get her on the board of the Westbrook Foundation for years, but she'd always politely declined. "I'm Eva," I said, attempting to salvage some dignity. "Eva Winters." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "From Westbrook. I know your work." "Not my finest moment," I attempted a smile, looking at my reflection, mascara streaked, hair dampened with coffee, dress ruined. "On the contrary," Mia said, "this might be the most important moment of your life." I stared at her, not understanding. The moment we stop accepting unacceptable behavior is the moment we begin to reclaim our power, she explained, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same shock, same public humiliation." As she helped me clean up, Mia told me about her own marriage to a prominent surgeon who had maintained a second family for years. How she'd discovered it at a hospital fundraiser. How she'd rebuilt her life afterward, founding the initiative that now helped hundreds of women each year. "But my situation is different," I protested. The professional fundraiser in me still, reluctant to draw parallels between my carefully curated life and anything resembling abuse. "Colby's never been violent before. This was a momentary lapse." Mia's expression was gentle but unflinching. "A man who would throw hot coffee on his wife in public is a man who has other lapses in private. Think carefully, Eva. Have there been signs you've been choosing not to see?" Her words hit me with unexpected force, opening a floodgate of memories I'd carefully filed away, the way Colby criticized my appearance when I gained 5 pounds after a stressful grant cycle. The jokes he made at my expense at dinner parties. How he'd dismiss my opinions during disagreements, saying I was too emotional to think clearly. The way he'd check my credit card statements, questioning purchases he deemed unnecessary. None of it had seemed abusive at the time. It was just Colby being Colby, precise, exacting, maintaining the standards we both valued. Wasn't it? I should go back out there, I said, straightening my shoulders. His parents are waiting at the restaurant. And what will you tell them? Mia asked. The question stopped me. What would I tell them? That their perfect son had been having an affair with my stepsister? That he'd thrown coffee at me when confronted? That our seemingly ideal marriage was a carefully maintained facade? I don't know, I admitted, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Eva Winters always had a plan, always knew what to say. Then perhaps it's time to stop managing everyone else's reactions and start honoring your own, Mia suggested. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. When you're ready, whether that's tonight or weeks from now, call me. My organization has resources that might help. I took the card automatically, still somewhat in shock. When we exited the restroom, the lounge had returned to its normal hum of conversation. Colby and April were gone. My phone showed 6 missed calls, 2 from Dean, 4 from Colby's mother. As if sensing my indecision, Mia said, "My driver can take you wherever you need to go." Part of me wanted to go directly home to confront Colby in private. Another part wanted to return to Calloway's, to maintain appearances, to somehow salvage the evening. The Eva of that morning would have known exactly what to do, would have calculated the most strategic response to minimize damage and maintain control of the narrative. But that Eva seemed very far away now. I can't go to Calloway's like this, I said, gesturing to my ruined dress. Then don't, Mia said simply. You don't owe anyone an appearance tonight. Her words felt like permission I hadn't known I needed. I texted Dean briefly, asking him to tell his parents I wasn't feeling well and we'd have to reschedule. No further explanation. Mia's driver took me not to my home but to a small boutique hotel across town, after I realized I couldn't face the house Colby and I shared. Not tonight. I checked in under my maiden name, using a credit card Colby didn't have access to, one I'd maintained separately for Foundation emergencies. In the anonymous safety of the hotel room, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had happened. The betrayal by my husband, the betrayal by April, the public humiliation, the realization that my carefully constructed life had been built on illusions. I ran my fingers over Mia's business card, remembering the quiet strength in her eyes. She'd rebuilt her life after a similar betrayal, had created something meaningful from the ashes of her marriage. But her path seemed impossible to imagine for myself. Colby and I weren't just married. Our lives were intricately intertwined. Joint accounts, property together, shared social circles centered around our carefully cultivated image as the perfect power couple. Professional connections that benefited us both. Walking away would mean dismantling everything I'd spent years building. Could I really start over at 35? My phone buzzed with incoming texts. Colby, alternating between apologies and justifications. You took me by surprise. I overreacted. We need to talk about this like adults. You're being dramatic. It was an accident. Where are you? Your behavior is concerning me. Each message made my stomach clench tighter. This was Colby's pattern. Maintaining control through a mixture of concern, criticism, and gaslighting. I'd always accepted it as part of his personality, his need for order and precision. Now, for the first time, I saw it clearly for what it was. I turned off my phone. That night, alone in the hotel room, I dreamed of Mia Thornton. In the dream, she was showing me through a beautiful garden filled with roses, each one representing a woman who had rebuilt her life after devastation. You could plant something here too, she was saying, pointing to an empty patch of earth. Something even more beautiful than what was destroyed. I woke up at dawn, my face still feeling tight from the coffee burns, my mind racing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since college, I skipped my morning run. Instead, I sat by the hotel window watching the sun rise over Atlanta. thinking about gardens and new growth and what it might mean to plant something entirely my own. It was too early to call Mia, but I placed her card on the nightstand where I could see it. A promise to myself. A first small step toward whatever came next. By noon the next day, my phone had 37 missed calls and 53 text messages. Colby, his parents, my father, even April, whose message simply read, "We need to talk. It's not what you think." The only person I responded to was Abby from the foundation, telling her I had a family emergency and would be working remotely for a few days. No details. Abby was efficient and discreet, asking only what she could do to help with my workload. After ordering room service, something I never did, considering it an unnecessary extravagance, I finally called the one person I trusted to. "Give me unfiltered truth, Mia Harris," answered my oldest friend, her voice warm despite the early hour on the West Coast. "It's Eva," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Well, this is a surprise. Aren't you supposed to be basking an anniversary? Glow right now?" There was teasing in her tone, but it faded quickly when I didn't respond. "Eva, what's wrong?" I told her everything, finding Colby with April, the confrontation, the coffee, meeting Mia Thornton. Once I started talking, the words poured out, revealing details I hadn't even acknowledged to myself. How Colby controlled our social calendar, how he subtly criticized my choices, how he'd isolated me from friends he deemed unstable influences, including Mia herself, whose visits had become less frequent after her divorce. "Oh, Eva," Mia sighed when I finished. "I'm so sorry, but I'm not entirely surprised." Her words stung. "What do you mean?" "Remember 2 years ago when I visited? How Colby made that comment about my poor life choices after the divorce? How he checked your phone while you were in the shower? I tried to talk to you about it, but you shut down." I had no memory of this conversation, which was telling in itself. "He's always been controlling, Ava. You've just been too close to see it, and too invested in the perfect image you created together." Her assessment was painful, but accurate. I'd been so focused on maintaining appearances that I'd missed the reality underneath. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling uncharacteristically lost. "Well, first, don't go home," Mia said firmly. "Not until you've had time to think clearly, away from his influence. I have to go home eventually. All my things are there. My life is there. Things can be replaced, and your life is wherever you choose to build it." Easy for her to say. Mia had moved across the country after her divorce, starting completely fresh. I had deep roots in Atlanta, professional connections, board, positions, community standing. The foundation will continue without you if necessary, Mia interrupted. "You're not defined by your job, Eva, no matter how much you've convinced yourself you are." After promising to call again soon, I hung up and stared at Mia Thornton's card. The Thornton Initiative's motto was printed beneath her name: "Growth through transition." I took a deep breath and dialed. Mia answered on the second ring, as if she'd been expecting my call. "We arranged to meet for coffee. The non-weaponized kind," she joked gently, "at a quiet cafe near my hotel." When I arrived, Mia was already there, dressed in a simple linen outfit that somehow projected both casual ease and unmistakable authority. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Have you spoken to him?" she asked as soon as I sat down. "No." I turned off my phone. She nodded approvingly. "Good. You need space to think clearly. What about other support? Friends? Family?" I laughed humorlessly. "My main family in Atlanta is my stepsister, who, as you saw, is sleeping with my husband. My father and Barbara live in Phoenix, and friends." I trailed off, realizing how few people I could genuinely call friends rather than strategic social connections. "Tell me about your support system," Mia said, her eyes kind but assessing. As I described my life, the charity boards, the foundation colleagues, the couples we socialized with. I heard myself describing a network defined almost entirely by utility rather than genuine connection. People who were useful for fundraising, for social advancement, for maintaining our image as a power couple. When was the last time you spent time with someone just because you enjoyed their company? Mia asked. No agenda, no networking, no social obligation? I had to think hard. Mia, my friend Mia, not you, I clarified with a small smile. When she visited last spring. But Colby thought she was a negative influence after her divorce. Said she was too emotional, too unstructured. I paused, hearing how this sounded. I didn't see her because my husband didn't approve of her life choices. Mia nodded, letting me come to my own realization. That's not normal, is it? I asked quietly. No, Mia confirmed. It's a classic isolation tactic. Cut someone off from independent relationships, and they become dependent on the relationship you control. The cafe suddenly felt too warm. But we were partners, I protested. Equals. I have my own career, my own money. And yet you allowed him to dictate your friendships, your appearance, your schedule. You internalized his standards so completely, you thought they were your own. I wanted to argue, but flashes of memory kept interrupting my defense. Colby suggesting I change before events if my outfit wasn't appropriate. Colby checking my calendar and questioning appointments he hadn't approved. Colby dismissing my longtime assistant's wedding as not worth the weekend because the bride's family wasn't well connected. None of it had seemed controlling at the time. It was just part of our shared vision for success, for the life we were building together, wasn't it? I had colleagues, my team at the foundation, I said weakly. Professional relationships are important, Mia acknowledged, but they're not the same as having people who love you for yourself, not your position or what you can do for them. As we continued talking, Mia gently helped me map out my actual support system, the people I could truly count on versus those who were connected to Colby or dependent on our joint social standing. The list of genuine supports was alarmingly short. Mia Harris on the West Coast, my father, though even that relationship was complicated by Barbara and April, and perhaps Abby, my assistant, whose loyalty had been proven time and again. This is why many women stay in controlling relationships, Mia explained. The isolation happens so gradually they don't notice until they need help and realize how few independent connections they have left. I'm not in an abusive relationship, I said automatically, then faltered. At least I didn't think I was. Abuse isn't just physical, Eva. Control, isolation, public humiliation, these are all forms of emotional abuse. And throwing hot coffee? On you? That's both emotional and physical. I touched my neck, where the skin was still slightly tender from the burns. He'd never done anything like that before. That you remember, Mia said gently. Our minds are remarkably good at reframing experiences to maintain our sense of safety and control. As I drove back to the hotel, Mia's insights echoed in my mind. Had I really been so blind? Had I willingly participated in my own isolation, prioritizing a perfect image over genuine connection? My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed, with a text from Colby. Your behavior is becoming concerning. If you don't come home by tonight, I'll have to take appropriate action. The message sent a chill through me, not just for its controlling tone, but because it was so familiar. This was how Colby always communicated when I stepped outside the boundaries he'd set. A mixture of concern and threat, designed to make me question my own judgment. For the first time, I saw it clearly for what it was. I pulled into the hotel, parking lot, and sat in my car, a sense of clarity washing over me. My support system might be smaller than I'd believed, but it was real, and it could be rebuilt, strengthened, expanded, if I had the courage to step away from the false stability Colby had constructed around us. I texted Abby, Need a favor? Can you discreetly get my personal laptop from my office and bring it to the Archer Hotel? Room 512. Don't tell anyone where I am. Then I texted Mia Harris. You were right. About everything. I'm not going home. Her response came immediately. Proud of you. What's your next step? I stared at the question for a long moment. My entire adult life had been planned with meticulous precision, each decision carefully calculated for maximum benefit to my career and social standing. Now I was contemplating stepping into a future I couldn't predict or control. I don't know, I typed honestly. But I'm ready to find out. The following week passed in a blur of practical decisions and emotional reckonings. I extended my stay at the hotel, had Abby bring me essential items from the office, and managed foundation business remotely. I'd responded to my father's concerned messages with vague reassurances, not yet ready to explain what had happened with April. Colby's messages had evolved from concern to anger to calculated remorse. I overreacted, he wrote. But you provoked me. We both made mistakes. Let's fix this together. I didn't respond, which seemed to infuriate him more than anything else. On the 7th day of my self-imposed exile, as I was reviewing grant proposals in my hotel room, there was a knock at the door. My heart raced. Had Colby found me? I approached cautiously and checked the peephole. April. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my stepsister. Her usual perfect appearance was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Eva, please, she said before I could speak. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She perched awkwardly on the edge of the desk chair while I remained standing, arms crossed. Colby told me you haven't been home, she began. He's worried about you. Colby is worried about how this looks, I corrected. And I imagine you are too. April flinched. I deserve that. But Eva, you have to understand. It wasn't what you think. You weren't having an affair with my husband? No, I mean, yes, but... She twisted her hands in her lap. It's complicated. April explained how it started during her stay in our guest house. Colby had told her our marriage was just for appearance, that we were staying together for professional reasons with no real connection. As she continued talking, I recognized Colby's familiar pattern, the same words, the same approach. He'd used with me years ago. The bracelet, I said suddenly. Was it a gift for your birthday? April's birthday had been the previous week. She looked startled. How did you know? Because he gave me the same bracelet 3 years ago. Same gold chain, same heart charm. Probably even the same inscription. To new beginnings, right? April's face confirmed it. He's not very original, I said with a hollow laugh. He uses the same playbook over and over. I was just too blind to see it. What do you mean? I mean, April, that you're not the first. And if I'd stayed, you wouldn't have been the last. She revealed that Colby had been different since that night. Angry, controlling, threatening. When she suggested taking a step back, he'd said she'd regret it, that no one would believe anything she said against him. There it was, the mask slipping to reveal the true face beneath. I'd seen glimpses of this Colby over the years, but always explained them away. I'm scared, Eva, April whispered. I thought I knew him, but now, despite everything, I felt a flicker of protective instinct toward my younger stepsister. Yes, she'd betrayed me horribly, but she'd also been manipulated by a man who excelled at identifying vulnerabilities and exploiting them. Listen carefully, I said, sitting across from her. You need to cut all contact with Colby, block his number, stay with friends he doesn't know, or go back to Phoenix to Dad and Barbara for a while. But my job is less important than your safety, I finished firmly. The man throws hot coffee on people who challenge him in public. What do you think he's capable of in private when he feels truly threatened? April stared at me, the full implications sinking in. Were you afraid of him? When you were together? The question caught me off guard. Had I been afraid? Not physically, perhaps. But I'd certainly structured my life around avoiding Colby's disapproval, his cold silences, his subtle punishments. I was careful, I said finally. I believed that was just part of marriage, anticipating your partner's needs, avoiding conflict. But looking back, I can see it wasn't normal. It was walking on eggshells. April nodded slowly. He makes you feel like you're the problem. Like if you were just better, more understanding, he wouldn't have to be so demanding. Exactly. Our eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding. Two women recognizing the same manipulation from the same man. After April left, promising to consider my advice about leaving town, I called Mia Thornton. I need to understand what's happening, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to see clearly what I've been living with. Then it's time you met some other women who've been where you are, Mia replied. Tomorrow night. My house, 7 p.m. Are you ready for that? Was I ready to admit that my marriage qualified me for a support group? That the life I'd thought was enviably perfect had actually been a carefully constructed cage? Yes, I said, surprising myself with the firmness of my conviction. I'm ready. Mia Thornton's home was nothing like I expected. Instead of the grand showcase I'd anticipated from a prominent philanthropist, her address led me to a modest craftsman bungalow in an artistic neighborhood. The interior was warm and eclectic, filled with art and books rather than carefully curated status symbols. 5 women were already gathered in the living room when I arrived, ranging in age from late 20s to early 60s. They shared a quality I couldn't immediately identify but later recognized as hard-won strength. Everyone, this is Eva, Mia introduced me. Eva, meet the Phoenix Circle. The name struck me. Phoenix, like rising from ashes? A woman with silver-streaked, dark hair smiled. Exactly. I'm Diana. I named the group when we started meeting 10 years ago. Mia explained that the Phoenix Circle wasn't formal therapy, but a support network for women who'd experienced controlling relationships and were rebuilding their lives. I still flinched at the word controlling being associated with my marriage. I'm not sure I belong here, I said hesitantly. Colby never hit me before the coffee incident. A younger woman with colorful tattoos leaned forward. My ex never hit me either. He just controlled every aspect of my life until I didn't recognize myself anymore. I'm Renee, by the way. One by one, the women introduced themselves. Diana, whose prominent husband had maintained complete financial control. Renee, whose boyfriend had isolated her from friends and family. Tamara, whose wife had subjected her to constant criticism. Jade, whose partner had used her immigration status as leverage. And Beth, whose seemingly perfect marriage had hidden patterns of control and infidelity. The hardest part for me, Beth said, was admitting that what looked perfect from the outside was destroying me on the inside. I'd invested so much in the image of our perfect life that acknowledging the reality felt like failure. Her words hit me with physical force. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been doing? When my turn came, I shared things I'd never voiced aloud. How Colby had gradually shaped every aspect of our life. How I'd internalized his standards until I no longer knew which choices were truly mine. Last week, I discovered he'd used the same approach with my stepsister, I concluded. The same compliments, the same gifts, even the same bracelet. It was like seeing behind the curtain of our entire relationship. Diana nodded. That moment of clarity, we all have one. The question is what you do with it. That's why we're called the Phoenix Circle, Renee added. It's about what rises from the ashes after that clarity burns everything down. The women shared not just their stories of control, but their journeys of rebuilding. Diana had started a financial literacy program. Jade had established a network for immigrant women. Tamara had reconnected with her passion for teaching. Beth had moved to a new city and started her own business. The transformation isn't just about leaving, Mia explained. It's about reclaiming yourself, your authentic desires, your genuine voice. I don't know if I even know what those are anymore, I admitted. That's normal, Diana assured me. The first step is creating space to rediscover yourself without his influence. As the meeting ended, each woman hugged me. Physical contact. I rarely experienced in my carefully maintained professional world. Remember, Diana said, the hardest step is the decision to reclaim your life. Everything after that is just logistics. Back at my hotel, I found a text from Colby. This has gone on long enough. I'm filing a missing persons report tomorrow. If you don't come home, your behavior is concerning everyone. Another attempt at control through a mixture of threat and concern. Once, it would have worked. I would have calculated the potential damage to my reputation and returned home to manage the situation. Not tonight. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since college. I journaled. 3 simple questions at the top of the page. What do I want? For my life? What parts of my current life are truly mine? What would I do if I weren't afraid? As dawn broke, I made my decision. I wouldn't be returning to our marriage or the life we'd constructed together. The path forward was uncertain, but the alternative, returning to a beautiful cage, was unthinkable. I called Mia. I need a lawyer, I said when she answered. And I need to go to the house today while Colby's at work. There are things I need to get before he knows I'm not coming back. Are you sure? Mia asked, though I could hear approval in her voice. Yes, I said with absolute conviction. I'm reclaiming my life. The lawyer Mia recommended was nothing like the polished corporate attorneys I was accustomed to. Denise Walker operated from a converted Victorian house, her office filled with plants and local art rather than imposing leather-bound law books. Mia filled me in on the basics, Denise said after we'd settled in her consultation room. Coffee, incident, controlling behavior, infidelity with your stepsister, charming guy. Her directness was refreshing after years of careful social navigation. I need to know my options, I said, and I need to get some things from the house. For the next hour, Denise outlined what I could expect: financial implications, the likely timeline, potential challenges given Colby's resources and connections. As for getting your belongings, she continued, legally, you have every right to enter your marital home. But given what you've described about Colby, I'd recommend having witnesses. Take only what's undisputedly yours: personal items, family heirlooms, essential documents. After leaving Denise's office, I called the 2 people I trusted most: Abby from the foundation and my friend Mia Harris, who had immediately booked a flight from Seattle. That afternoon, with Abby and Mia flanking me like protective bookends, I returned to the home Colby and I had shared for 5 years. I'd timed the visit carefully, knowing his Thursday schedule included back-to-back meetings until evening. Inside, everything was immaculate, almost suspiciously so. The house had a staged quality, as if prepared for a showing. We worked efficiently, filling the suitcases and boxes we'd brought with items that were undisputedly mine. In my home office, I found evidence of Colby's surveillance. My desk had been searched, files rearranged. My computer was missing, and I discovered a tracking app on my tablet, allowing him to monitor my emails and messages. Eva, you need to see this, Abby called from the kitchen. On the countertop sat a typed letter, positioned where I couldn't miss it. In it, Colby claimed I was experiencing a psychological break, mentioning my grandmother's recent passing, though she had died 3 years ago. He was laying groundwork to claim I was mentally unstable. As we continued our collection, I noticed other concerning details: prescription bottles with my name that I'd never seen before, and a journal I didn't recognize filled with handwriting that mimicked mine but wasn't, documenting episodes of paranoia. He's building a case, Mia said, grimly. creating a paper trail to question your mental competence. We were nearly finished when Abby suddenly stiffened. Someone just entered the garage code. Colby was home early. Moments later, he walked in, stopping short at the sight of us. He was perfectly put together as always. Tailored suit, immaculate hair, professional smile already in place. "Eva," he said, his voice controlled. "I see you've finally come home." His gaze swept over Mia and Abby dismissively. "Though you've brought company." "I'm just collecting some personal items," I said, my voice steadier than expected. "We'll be gone soon." "There's no need for that. This is your home." He moved toward me, all concern for our audience. "We need to talk about what's been happening with you. I've been so worried." He glanced meaningfully at the medication on the nightstand. "Did you bring your prescriptions?" Dr. Reynolds stressed how important it is to maintain your regimen. The calculated performance was impressive. The concerned husband worried about his wife's mental health. If I'd reacted with anger, I would have played into his narrative of instability. Instead, I smiled calmly. "How interesting that you mention prescriptions I've never taken, from a doctor I've never met. Mia, would you mind taking another photo? For Denise?" Colby's expression hardened, the mask of concern disappearing. "You've clearly been influenced by your new friends. When you're ready to behave rationally, we can discuss your return home." As we walked out, carrying the remnants of my personal life in a few boxes, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I had just publicly defied Colby for the first time, and the ground hadn't opened beneath my feet. The life I had known was over, but something new was beginning, something entirely mine. The conference room at the Westbrook Foundation fell silent as I finished speaking. 9 board members, Atlanta's elite philanthropists and business leaders, stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to sympathy to careful neutrality. Had just informed them that I was divorcing Colby Sullivan, that the foundation's executive director would no longer be part of Atlanta's perfect power couple, and that there might be some uncomfortable public attention in the coming weeks. Curtis. Morgan, our newest board member, was the first to speak. "Well, personal matters aside, what impact do you anticipate this will have on the capital campaign?" The question was exactly what I'd expected. Pragmatic, focused on the foundation's bottom line rather than my personal well-being. 2 weeks ago, I would have had the perfect response ready, focused on damage control and reassurance. Today, I found I didn't have the energy for the careful dance of donor management. "To be honest, Curtis, I don't know," I replied. "What I do know is that I can't effectively lead this organization if I'm constantly worried about how my divorce might impact donations." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. I had never been so bluntly honest in a board meeting before. "The foundation's work is too important to be tied to my marital status," I continued. "If donors decide to withdraw support because I'm leaving a controlling relationship, that's their decision, and perhaps not donors we want anyway." Barbara Wilson, the board chair, studied me thoughtfully. "This isn't like you, Eva. You've always been so strategic about donor relationships." "I'm discovering there are many things about me that I've suppressed in the name of strategy," I admitted. Which brings me to my second announcement. I'm requesting a 3-month sabbatical to handle my personal transition and reassess my leadership. This caused a true stir. In my 7 years as executive director, I'd never taken more than a week off. After the meeting, Barbara pulled me aside. "I've known something was wrong for months," she said quietly. "You've been fading before our eyes, becoming more polished but less present. Whatever's happening with Colby, I'm glad you're finding your voice again." Her words stayed with me as I cleaned out my office that afternoon, packing personal items into boxes while Abby helped organize files for the transition. The foundation had been the center of my identity for so long, the primary arena where I exercised my carefully honed competence. Stepping away, even temporarily, felt like removing a crucial support beam from my identity. "What will you do?" Abby asked. "During your sabbatical, I mean." I laughed softly. "I have absolutely no idea. That's rather the point." The truth was, I couldn't remember the last time I'd made decisions without considering their impact on my professional advancement, social standing, or Colby's approval. What did Eva Winters, not Eva Sullivan, not the executive director, not the perfect wife, actually want? That evening, I received a surprising call from my father. He and Barbara were coming to Atlanta and wanted to meet. The conversation I'd been avoiding about April could no longer be postponed. Over dinner the next evening, I finally shared the full story. Not just the coffee incident, but the patterns of control, the gaslighting, the evidence Colby had planted, suggesting I was mentally unstable. My father listened with growing anger, while Barbara's expression moved from skepticism to horror. April came to my hotel room after it happened, I concluded. She admitted the affair but said Colby had convinced her our marriage was just for show. When she tried to end things with him, he threatened her career. Barbara's eyes filled with tears. She's back in Phoenix because she said she needed a break from her job. I thought she was running from him, I finished. Which was the right thing to do? My father reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Eva. I had no idea it was this bad." "I didn't want anyone to know," I admitted. "I was too proud, too invested in the perfect image we'd created. It took having hot coffee thrown in my face to finally see clearly." As I walked through Piedmont Park after dinner, processing the conversation, I received a text from Mia Thornton. "The Thornton Initiative Board has a proposal I'd like you to hear." The next morning, Mia introduced me to her team and offered me a position developing a new program called the Phoenix Professional Network, focused on helping professional women transitioning out of controlling relationships. "You understand? What these women are experiencing in a way that someone with only academic knowledge couldn't," Mia explained. "Your professional background gives you the skills, and your own journey gives you the authenticity to lead it." For the first time in months, I could envision a future that integrated my professional skills with authentic meaning, work that would transform my painful experience into something that could help others navigate similar journeys. As I left the Thornton Initiative that day, I felt a strange sense of things coming full circle. The coffee incident that had shattered my carefully constructed life was potentially leading me towards something meaningful, something completely mine. The divorce proceedings took a decisive turn in early August, 3 months after the coffee incident. Denise called me into her office, where she sat surrounded by stacks of documents, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. "We've got him," she announced as soon as I settled into the chair. "Remember how Colby's been fighting the financial discovery process? Now we know why." She pushed a folder toward me containing evidence that Colby had been systematically moving funds from our joint accounts into offshore holdings for at least 2 years, preparing for a separation long before I'd discovered his affair with April. "What he's been doing is illegal," Denise continued, "and it gives us significant leverage. His attorney requested a meeting tomorrow to discuss settlement terms." As I left Denise's office, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The evidence of Colby's financial deception should have hurt, but it simply confirmed what I already knew. Our entire relationship had been built on calculation rather than connection. The settlement meeting took place in a sterile conference room at his lawyer's downtown office. It was the first time I'd seen Colby since collecting my belongings from our house. He looked immaculate as always, but there was a tightness around his eyes that revealed the strain of recent months. Throughout the negotiation, Colby barely looked at me, speaking almost exclusively to Denise. The settlement offer they presented was far more generous than I'd anticipated, likely motivated by his desire to avoid public exposure of his financial manipulations. When we finalized the preliminary agreement, Colby's attorney stepped out to make copies, leaving us momentarily alone with Denise. "You didn't have to do this," Colby said suddenly, his voice low. We could have worked things out privately. The familiar, manipulative tone no longer had power over me. Actually, I did have to do this, I replied calmly. I had to choose myself for once. Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps recognition that the woman sitting across from him was not the Eva he'd controlled for years. This Eva saw him clearly, without the distorting lens of his manipulation. That evening, I received an unexpected invitation from Mia Thornton to attend a planning session for the Phoenix Professional Network. Though I hadn't formally accepted the position yet, I found myself intrigued by the project in a way I hadn't felt about work in years. The meeting was held in the Thornton Initiative's collaborative workspace, so different from the formal hierarchy of the Westbrook Foundation. A diverse team of professionals had gathered to discuss the program's framework, and Mia invited me to share my perspective. At first, I hesitated, uncertain of my place in this new environment. But as the discussion progressed, I found myself contributing more confidently, drawing from both my professional expertise and my personal experience. What these women need most, I explained, is practical support coupled with genuine validation. When you're coming out of a controlling relationship, you doubt your own judgment. Every decision feels fragile. The team listened attentively, building on my insights, treating my experience as valuable expertise rather than a personal failing. It was a startling contrast to the careful distance my foundation colleagues had maintained since news of my separation. After the meeting, Mia pulled me aside. You have a unique perspective that's essential to this project, Eva. You understand both worlds, the professional pressures these women face, and the personal reality of breaking free from control. I'm still in the midst of my own process, I reminded her. I don't have all the answers. That's precisely what makes you authentic. You're not speaking from some distant, healed perspective. You're in the trenches, dealing with the same challenges they are. As I drove home, I reflected on how differently I felt leaving this meeting compared to foundation board meetings. Instead of the careful performance of competence I'd maintained for years, I'd been genuinely engaged, contributing from a place of authentic experience rather than strategic calculation. For the first time since the coffee incident, I could see a path forward that felt meaningful. Not because it advanced my social standing or professional reputation, but because it connected my painful experience to a larger purpose. That night, I wrote 2 emails. The first was to Barbara at the Westbrook Foundation, extending my sabbatical indefinitely. The second was to Mia Thornton, accepting the consultant position with the Phoenix Professional Network. As I clicked send on both messages, I felt a sense of alignment I hadn't experienced in years. The coffee had burned away more than just my perfect dress. It had scorched through the carefully constructed facade of my life, revealing a more authentic path beneath. September brought crisp mornings, changing leaves, and the first real test of my newfound independence. I had settled into a productive routine. Mornings consulting with the Thornton Initiative on the Phoenix Professional Network, afternoons working on my own healing through therapy and creative pursuits, evenings connecting with actual friends rather than strategic social contacts. The divorce settlement was proceeding smoothly, my financial future secure enough to move forward without anxiety. I'd even begun looking at small houses in neighborhoods I'd previously dismissed as too bohemian for someone of my position. Then, the counterattack began. It started with a phone call from Abby. Eva, you need to come to the foundation. There's a situation. The tension in her voice alarmed me. What kind of situation? The kind that requires your physical presence, as soon as possible. I arrived at the Westbrook Foundation 30 minutes later to find the board assembled in the conference room. Barbara's face was grave as she motioned for me to sit. Eva, she began, her tone formal. Serious concerns have been raised about foundation funds that we need to address immediately. Curtis Morgan pushed a folder toward me containing financial reports showing inconsistencies in several major donor accounts, discrepancies that suggested misappropriation. These irregularities appear to coincide with your time as executive. Director? Curtis stated, his tone making the implication clear. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate. I stared at the documents, momentarily speechless. The transactions looked legitimate at first glance. They included my electronic signature and followed protocols I'd established, but I had no recollection of authorizing them. I didn't make these transfers, I said finally. Someone has falsified my authorization. Curtis's expression remained skeptical. The timing is concerning. These discrepancies appear shortly before your personal difficulties began. The insinuation was clear. I had been embezzling foundation funds to prepare for my divorce from Colby. This is absurd, I stated, keeping my voice steady despite the panic rising within me. I've dedicated 7 years to this foundation. I would never— No one is making accusations, Barbara interrupted. We're simply following necessary procedures. The board has voted to engage an independent auditor and to place you on administrative leave until the investigation is complete. As I left the foundation building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have taken the settlement offer when you had the chance. I didn't need to ask who it was from. Colby had escalated from trying to control me to actively trying to destroy me. Back at my apartment, I called Denise immediately. Colby's framing me for financial mismanagement at the foundation, I explained, forwarding her the documents I'd photographed. Slow down, Denise counseled. First, this is almost certainly related to your rejection of his latest settlement terms. He's trying to pressure you into accepting less. By destroying my reputation and possibly sending me to jail? It's a power play. He's showing what he's capable of if you continue defying him. Men like Colby can't tolerate losing control. After arranging for a forensic accountant to review the documents, I called Mia Thornton. Her response was immediate and practical. Come to the initiative office, she instructed. We need to get ahead of this. At the Thornton Initiative, I found not just Mia but Diana from the Phoenix Circle and a woman I didn't recognize. This is Veronica Adams, Mia introduced. Former prosecutor, now specializing in financial fraud cases. Veronica's handshake was firm, her gaze direct. Mia filled me in. This is a sophisticated attack designed to isolate you professionally while the divorce is still vulnerable to renegotiation. How do I fight it? I asked. First, we document everything. The timing relative to the settlement negotiations, any communications suggesting coercion. Second, we engage our own forensic investigation to prove the transactions were falsified. Third, we prepare a counter-narrative for when this inevitably becomes public. That evening, as we developed our response strategy, my phone erupted with notifications. The story had broken. Westbrook Foundation Director under investigation for financial irregularities. The article included quotes from sources close to the foundation, expressing disappointment in my leadership and concern about my recent erratic behavior. Colby's fingerprints were all over it. By morning, the story had spread through Atlanta's nonprofit community. Former colleagues sent concerned messages, donors called for reassurance, and my email filled with meeting cancellations from community partners suddenly hesitant to be associated with me. What hurt most was the silence from board members I'd considered allies. Only Barbara called, her tone apologetic but firm. The evidence is compelling, Ava. I want to believe you, but the documentation— It's falsified, I insisted. Colby has access to all my passwords, my signature stamps, everything. This is retaliation for the divorce. 3 days into the crisis, as Veronica's team worked to untangle the electronic trail of the falsified transactions, I received another blow. April called, her voice trembling. Eva, I need your help. Colby's threatening me. What do you mean? I asked, caution battling with concern. He wants me to sign a statement saying you knew about our relationship all along, that you approved of it, that the scene at the hotel was you having a breakdown after your grandmother's death. He says, if I don't sign, he'll tell everyone I was the one who helped him move foundation money. He has emails that make it look like I was involved. The pieces clicked into place. He's setting up a backup plan. If he can't make the embezzlement charges stick to me, he'll pin it on you. Despite everything, April's distress triggered a protective instinct. Don't sign anything. Forward any communications from him to my lawyer. And April, I need you to consider going on record about your relationship with Colby, about the pressure he's putting on you now. He'll destroy me professionally. He's already trying to do that, I pointed out. The question is whether you'll let him succeed on his terms or fight back on yours. That night, I met with the Phoenix Circle, needing the support of women who understood what I was facing. As I described Colby's escalating attacks, heads nodded in grim recognition. My ex did the same thing, Beth shared. When I left, he contacted my biggest clients with false stories about my reliability. I had to rebuild my entire business from scratch. It's about power, Diana explained. When they lose control over you directly, they try to control how others see you. Your professional identity is under attack because he knows how much you value it. The question is, Renee added, what will you fight for and what will you surrender? You can't battle on every front. It was a perspective I needed. Permission to be strategic about my responses, to focus my energy where it mattered most, to accept that some losses were inevitable in the larger war for my independence. As I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. Colby's counterattack was brutal, potentially devastating to the professional identity I'd spent years building. But in attacking my career so viciously, he had inadvertently clarified what mattered most, not my professional reputation, but my hard-won clarity and authenticity. I pulled into my apartment complex, noticing a familiar car in the visitors' parking, Abby's. She was sitting on the steps to my building, waiting. I found something, she said as I approached, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. About the financial transfers. I think I know how they were falsified. I found a hidden program on the Foundation's accounting system, Abby explained once we were inside my apartment. It was installed 3 months ago using your credentials, but the access logs show it happened during your conference in Washington when your laptop was in the office. When Colby offered to drop it off for me, I remembered, the pieces falling into place. Abby nodded. The program creates a shadow copy of your digital signature that can be applied to transactions without the usual verification protocols. I only found it because I was looking for discrepancies in the system timestamps. Can you prove it wasn't me who installed it? Better. I can prove it was Colby. She pulled out her phone, showing me security footage from the Foundation office. He came in that day, supposedly to drop off documents. This shows him at your computer for nearly 20 minutes. I immediately called Denise and Veronica, forwarding Abby's evidence. By morning, we had prepared a comprehensive report for the Foundation Board and the forensic auditors, documenting how Colby had systematically set me up to take the fall for financial mismanagement. The emergency board meeting that followed was tense but decisive. Curtis Morgan remained skeptical, but Barbara stood firmly in my corner as the technical evidence mounted. The board voted unanimously to clear my name and issue a public statement, supporting me. We owe you an apology, Barbara said afterward. We should have trusted you. Colby counted on people's willingness to believe the worst, I replied. It's how manipulation works. Create enough smoke, and people assume fire. The Foundation's public statement supporting me appeared in the same business journal that had published the original allegations. Meanwhile, Veronica's team had assembled evidence of Colby's broader campaign of retaliation, including his attempts to coerce April into providing false testimony. His carefully constructed attack had backfired spectacularly, strengthening our position in the divorce proceedings, while exposing his vindictive nature to the very professional community he'd tried to turn against me. The final blow to Colby's counterattack came from an unexpected source. Dr. Reynolds, the psychiatrist. He had claimed was treating me, filed a formal ethics complaint against him for falsely using his name in fabricated medical documents. As a respected member of Atlanta's medical community, Dr. Reynolds' statement carried weight that couldn't be dismissed. Faced with mounting evidence of his retaliatory behavior, Colby's attorney contacted Denise with a revised settlement offer. One that required no further negotiations and included a non-disparagement clause that would prevent him from making any future false claims against me. "We've won," Denise said when she called with the news. "He's retreating to minimize the damage to his own reputation." As I signed the final divorce papers, I felt not triumph, but liberation. This hadn't been about defeating Colby, but about freeing myself from his control, both the obvious forms and the subtle manipulations I'd accepted for years. The professional reputation he'd tried to destroy was already rebuilding itself. But more importantly, I was building something new from the foundation of my authentic self. The launch of the Phoenix Professional Network was scheduled for late October, 6 months after the coffee incident that had changed the trajectory of my life. What had begun as a consultant position had evolved into full program leadership, as I discovered a passion for the work that surpassed anything I'd experienced at the foundation. The initiative would provide professional women leaving controlling, relationships with legal resources, career counseling, financial planning, and peer support. All the tools I wished I'd had during my own transition. "Are you nervous?" Mia asked as we prepared for the press conference announcing the program. "Strangely, no," I replied, realizing it was true. For the first time, I'm not worried about how I'll be perceived because I'm completely aligned with the purpose. The event was held at the Thornton Initiative's headquarters, with representatives from Atlanta's business community, nonprofit sector, and media in attendance. I had expected perhaps 20 attendees. We got over 60, including several foundation board members and former colleagues who had maintained their distance during the embezzlement allegations. Standing at the podium, I told my story publicly. For the first time, not the sanitized version I might once have crafted to minimize damage, but the raw truth about the controlling relationship, the public humiliation of having coffee thrown on me, and the subsequent campaign of retaliation I'd faced. The most dangerous moment for women in controlling relationships is when they decide to leave, I explained. The Phoenix Professional Network exists to provide practical support and community during that critical transition, particularly addressing the professional challenges these women face. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me afterward, some sharing their own experiences in hushed tones, others offering resources, expertise, or funding for the initiative. Barbara Wilson committed Westbrook Foundation support to our legal defense fund. Curtis Morgan, surprisingly, offered pro bono financial counseling services from his firm. Even more meaningful was the emergence of a wider community. Diana from the Phoenix Circle brought other survivors who had rebuilt their lives. Veronica Adams introduced colleagues from the legal community willing to provide services. April, who had flown in from Phoenix specifically for the event, stood publicly beside me, our fractured relationship healing through our shared experience of Colby's manipulation. "You've created something remarkable," Diana told me at the reception afterward. "Not just the program itself, but this gathering of people committed to supporting women through transition. I didn't create it alone," I corrected her, gesturing to the room filled with allies who had emerged during my darkest moments. Every person here played a role. Later that evening, as I helped clean up after the event, my phone pinged with a news alert. A prominent pharmaceutical company had placed Colby on administrative leave pending an investigation into ethical concerns. Though not explicitly stated, the timing suggested the evidence from our divorce proceedings had reached his professional sphere. I felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only a sense of justice, not just for me, but for every person whose trust he had betrayed. What Colby had intended as a moment of humiliation throwing coffee on me in a crowded restaurant, had instead become the catalyst for genuine connection, purposeful work, and a community stronger than any I had known in my carefully curated former life. 1 year to the day after Colby threw hot coffee on my anniversary dress, I stood in the garden of my new home, a modest craftsman bungalow, not unlike Mia Thornton's, in a neighborhood filled with artists and educators rather than corporate executives. The garden was hosting a celebration, marking both the anniversary of my liberation and the successful first 6 months of the Phoenix Professional Network. Women from all stages of transition mingled on my lawn, some just beginning their journey, out of controlling relationships, others years into their rebuilding process. The Phoenix Circle members were there, along with the growing team from the Thornton Initiative, Abby from the Foundation, and my father and Barbara, who had become unexpected allies in my transformation. Even April was present, our relationship, healed into something new. Not the distant stepsister relationship we'd had before, but a genuine connection forged through shared experience and recovery. "I barely recognize you," my father said, but his tone indicated it was a positive observation. "You seem so much more present." "That's because I am," I replied. "I'm actually living my life now, not performing it." The transformation hadn't been simple or linear. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, days when I missed the certainty of my former life. But each challenge had strengthened my resolve rather than weakening it, confirming that the harder path was the right one. As the evening progressed, Diana clinked her glass for attention. A year ago, our friend Eva was sitting in a hotel room, with coffee burns on her neck and chest, her life seemingly in ruins. Today, she's helped a dozen women navigate similar transitions and created a model program that's being replicated in 3 other cities. She raised her glass higher. To Ava, who reminds us that sometimes what looks like destruction is actually the beginning of something authentic and powerful. The gathering erupted in cheers, but I felt a need to add something. "Thank you all," I said, my voice steady in a way it never would have been a year ago when faced with unscripted emotion. But this celebration isn't really about me. It's about what we create when we choose truth over appearance, authenticity over performance, and community over isolation. I looked around at these people who had become my true circle. Not strategic social connections, but genuine supporters who had seen me at my most vulnerable and stood by me anyway. A year ago, I thought my life was ending when coffee stained my perfect dress. I couldn't imagine a future outside the carefully constructed image I'd maintained. Now, I know that moment wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first step toward a life that's messy, unpredictable, and completely mine. As twilight deepened and lights twinkled in the garden, I found myself standing with Mia Thornton, watching the community we'd helped gather. "So," she asked with a gentle smile, "was it worth it? All the pain and disruption to arrive here?" I considered the question seriously, thinking about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. "Yes," I said finally. "I lost a husband, a house, and a carefully managed image. But I found myself. That's a trade I'd make again every time. I've shared my story, not because it's unique, but because I know it isn't." Right now, someone watching this is sitting in a beautiful home with a seemingly perfect relationship, wondering why they feel so hollow inside. Wondering if the constant criticism, the subtle control, the walking on eggshells is just how relationships work. It's not. Some of you recognized yourselves in my story. Maybe your partner doesn't throw coffee, but they throw words that burn just as badly. Maybe they don't physically block the door when you try to leave, but they make the emotional cost of independence seem too high to bear. Maybe they don't falsify financial records, but they undermine your confidence until you doubt your own perceptions. These are all forms of control, and you deserve to be free of them. When that coffee hit my dress, it was both the worst and best moment of my life. The worst because of the public humiliation, the betrayal, the burning realization of how deeply I'd been deceived. The best because it finally made visible what had been invisible for years: the control, the manipulation, the slow erosion of my authentic self. Not everyone gets such a clear moment of revelation. For many, the awakening comes gradually, a growing discomfort that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. However it comes, that recognition is not the end of your story. It's the beginning. I won't pretend the journey is easy. Leaving a controlling relationship means confronting not just the person who controlled you, but the parts of yourself that accepted that control. It means rebuilding your identity, your boundaries, your trust in your own judgment. But I promise you this: on the other side of that difficult journey is a life that truly belongs to you. A life where your choices reflect your authentic desires rather than someone else's expectations. A life where you recognize manipulation instead of internalizing it. A life where you're the author of your own story, not a character in someone else's. If you're in a controlling relationship now, know that you're not alone. There are resources, communities, and people who understand what you're experiencing and can help you navigate the path to freedom. You don't have to figure it all out at once. You just need to take the first step. My first step came wrapped in humiliation and coffee stains. Yours might look completely different, but whatever form it takes, I hope you'll recognize it as the gift it truly is. The invitation to reclaim yourself. You deserve to be free. You deserve to be whole. You deserve a life that is authentically, messily, gloriously yours. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.